Hello and welcome to the Twins Ticket live stream. As you can see here tonight, we are talking about a 2022 Minnesota Twins roster projection. The team has been trimming things down. There have been some cuts. There have been some guys optioned to minor leagues. There have been some guys sent back to the minor league side who were non-roster invites as well. So we are narrowing things down. So we're going to kind of take a shot at a 28-man roster is what we have this year, at least to start the year for the first month. What is up, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me. My name's Tom Froming, a.k.a. TF Twins, which is the channel name here on YouTube as well as my Twitter handle. You can go follow me there. Just checking out. We got the chat here live. Going to keep that up. So if you got anything to share and certainly talk amongst yourselves as well. I see Nathan was getting a little antsy. Just first want to say thanks for everybody who's been usually joining on Wednesday, coming and hanging out on Thursday evening. If anybody's watching a replay that couldn't be here because of that, I apologize. Sometimes things just come up, but it's a good thing for where we're going to be at in the regular season. Because if the Twins play night games on Wednesdays, we're not going to do the live stream on Wednesday. We'll probably do it Thursday of that week. So, it'll bounce around a little bit. So. I'm not going to opening day. Not me. I'm excited that there has been such a positive response from Twins fans. I'll probably get out to actually a Gopher game before I get out to a Twins game and maybe even a Saints game. But, I definitely have plans to be at Target Field. I'm not like a big crowd person, so I don't love it when like it's literally a sellout. I had a season ticket package through I think it was like 2012, 13, 14. Like I don't remember the exact years, but it was in that range when they were bad. So that's that's sort of my cozy feeling at Target Field when it's a little more roomy. But I will certainly be attending my fair share of games. So the big news of the day for today that we should lead off with is that Joe Ryan is going to be the opening day starter for the Twins. Pretty crazy to think of that. Going to be pulling up some stuff here, but not quite. Ansley says day games on school days. I think one of the past few years I went to the lowest attended game ever at Target Field. It was a day game while school was still in session and it was poor weather. So, not the best conditions to go to a game, but there was no lines. There was plenty of room. Now, of course, I do like a good ballpark atmosphere. So, there's a happy medium between the hustle and bustle of opening day and the least attended game in Target Field history that I like. But you got to remember, too, I kind of on my own, the first kind of years that I was going to Twins games was in the late 90s, early 2000s when there were, in the big, giant Metrodome, there were like 8,000 people some games at those ones. So I think I just kind of got sort of used to that and spoiled to not having to, deal with lines and such. So again, Joe Ryan. 5 career starts. His 6th career start is going to come as the Twins opening day starter in 2022. Pretty crazy. Obviously, very excited for him. Clearly, he has done things to put himself into this situation. I want to mention that first because I don't want to lose sight of that fact. This is great. This is positive. Very happy for Joe Ryan. However, I can't help but kind of come away with this a little bit kind of depressed that it's pretty clear Sonny Gray would have been kind of the more traditional, more obvious choice for the opening day starter. But he's behind. He's running a little bit behind. If you saw some of the interview I shared with him when he was on MLB Network, a part I didn't include in that was him talking about where he was at, and you could just tell he didn't really necessarily say anything about being ready for opening day or not, but you could tell the way he was talking that he didn't really feel 100% comfortable with where he was progression wise. Now this was a little bit ago, and he's now thrown an outing on the minor league side, so it's not like Gray is not throwing or shut down. There's not any reason to be really concerned about Sonny Gray. So, I'm holding out hope that he can still take a turn, through the first 5 guys in the rotation, that it's just like literally opening day. It doesn't look like it, but maybe the 4th or 5th game, he'll be fine. And then, there's really no need to worry about that. And I think as long as, Sonny Gray's a pro. Sonny Gray's been in the league a while. He's a guy who's 32 years old. You got to listen to him. You got to trust him. The Twins don't know him as well either. So if he's kind of giving them, the indication that he doesn't feel like he's going to be ready to go, the most important thing is that they get him for as much of the season as possible. He's such an important piece to this rotation right now as it's built, that you wouldn't want to jeopardize anything just to put him out there on opening day, just because that's the way you want the rotation to work out. So I'm happy for Joe Ryan, a little bummed for Sonny Gray, but again, it's not huge reason for concern. I see somebody asking about Kenta. I don't think Kenta is not gone all year. Not that we're expecting it, but he's going to miss the majority of the season. It's kind of, at this point, I think they were saying maybe August, which, one little setback can push him back, and then potentially he's not back. So I think it's productive to sort of consider him as being out if you're thinking from like a team building perspective, essentially. But I would say we should be realistically expecting to see Kenta make some starts toward the end of the year. All right. So talking about potentially projecting the opening day roster. Now we talked about that. Went over that bit about the opening day starter and Joe Ryan. We're here at Fangraphs. We're here at a part of Roster Resource, and there are, obviously so many great things at Fangraphs. I want to encourage you to support them, and just under Roster Resource, what Jason R.R. Martinez brings to the table is so nice and so valuable. I was about to start to put this together myself, and I realized I think he has this, and he does on here. So on the top of Fangraphs, you go to Roster Resource, you can see this off-season tools. And in that is you can't really see it because I think my head is in the way. Yeah, well, sort of. My little square is in the way. But underneath that is an opening day tracker. So that's what I have pulled up here, what you see on the bigger screen. And as you can see, you can filter this out to still in camp. This is super valuable because you don't find this anywhere on the Twins site. They'll give you the 40-man roster. They'll give you all the guys who are non-roster invitees from the start of camp. But as far as I can tell, as far as I've looked, maybe somewhere I'm just not looking, you can't see a list of guys who are still in camp. Now, what does that actually mean? It's kind of tricky because just because you're not listed as one of these guys still in camp, you may be getting into spring training games. But essentially, you have been either optioned or reassigned back to minor league camp. And when you're coming in and maybe just filling out a roster for a spring game, you're doing it as a non-roster minor league guy. So essentially, if we're trying to narrow down this roster, it's 36 guys. I don't think there's any rules against bringing somebody you've optioned back or reassigned to the minors back. But I think realistically, this list of 36 guys is what we're considering the guys who are potentially going to fill out the 28-man roster. Again, with spring training being delayed and being shortened, League Baseball and the Players Association have agreed to add 2 roster spots through April. So on May 1st, that's gone. It's 26-man rosters like it has been the last year or two, however long that's been bumped up from 25. So there are 2 extra spots. There are no limits on how many pitchers you can carry. There's no, it's 28 spots and you can do whatever you want with them. I think most teams are going to be bringing 2 extra pitchers, but that's not, required. And, that is sort of the heart of why they're expanding rosters, is to make sure teams have more pitching. So I would expect the Twins are going to, approach that. So, again, I wanted to bring this up to just let you know that this is a resource that's out there if you want to keep an eye out for it. The most recent cuts from camp, basically guys who got optioned, were Jose Miranda. You will not find on this list anymore. He was optioned to the minor leagues. And Trevor Larnach was as well. Miranda, I wasn't too excited or too surprised by, pardon me. because it's hard to see right now where the path to his playing time is be. Just with, Urshela at third, with Arraez playing there quite a bit, I'd imagine. Polanco at second, with Arraez mixing in there as well. Sano at first, and they don't have really like a traditional DH, so that's maybe a place where you could have seen him work in. But still, I was kind of not to say that I necessarily would have taken this route. I'm not sure. If they're sending him down to AAA to work on maybe some outfield, I could see that being a little bit more valuable. I could kind of get behind that idea. But I think he's ready. He's ready. Miranda's going to be just sort of waiting in the wings, and he's a guy who, once there's an injury or once there's a need that arises, Miranda's going to be called upon, especially for an infielder. Trevor Larnach was having a great spring. He's been looking really good, but sort of kind of the same situation there. Being a left outfielder, it just how many of those guys do you need on the major league roster? And then Trevor Larnach hasn't played a ton in AAA, so I think he could use some more time down there. Not that he necessarily needs it, but he could use it. And Vitsky, I feel like we got to trade a few of these infield guys for pitching. I mean, you could even say outfield too. The Twins, it's if there's one thing you can kind of be a little annoyed at, it's that we kind of came into the off season thinking, man, they really should move some bats for some arms. And it appears we may be going into the season with that same mentality, even though there's been so many exciting and fun and great signings and moves in between. It's sort of same story, different mix of guys. Now, there's no rules against trading. There's no trade deadline until later. So it is possible as teams are making these decisions. I just saw some rumors that the Padres are potentially open to trading some of their pitchers. And as if you've been following the channel, that's been a team I've been sort of speculating that maybe, they'd like to shed some money, or they have extra arms, or they are going to have some other needs to address. So certainly keep that in mind. There'll be other teams too. I know, unfortunately, Luis Castillo for the Reds is going to be hurt. He's more than likely going to start the year on the injured list, so he's kind of probably out of the picture in terms of that. But I know Oakland has kind of put out the vibe that they're going to keep their guys, but all it takes is one phone call and having the right conversation to have mine. But anyway, I took all of this and put it into a spreadsheet to sort of have a bit of a different conversation about it. And what I did was took these 36 guys that were listed there that are still in camp and basically threw them into a 28-man roster of path of least resistance. And we'll kind of mess with things from here. But this would be like, okay, if they don't want to take anybody who's not on the 40-man roster and add them to the 40-man roster, that's going to, you're going to have to either transfer somebody to the 60-day injured list who's injured. I'm not sure if they're going to do that I think Blaine Enlow was the guy that a guy who's hurt right now on the 40-man roster who's not there, but there could be sort of like a service time issue with that. We'll see. Or you got to remove somebody from the 40-man roster, and I'm not sure they want to do, they are going to potentially subject that player to the waivers. So I'm not sure they're going to want to do that. Additionally, you got to remember, too, there's going to be that scenario going on with other players across the league. So I want to mention that before. There's still some time before opening day. There could be guys who are getting exposed to waivers that the Twins are looking at, like, Jose Godoy, who they picked up, and John Romero. So, again, this is let's just sort of throw this in at the path of least resistance and go from here. And, the first thing I want to point out, I threw out like a defensive lineup and a bench. Clearly, Luis Arraez is going to be playing a ton. He's going to be playing a lot of third base. He's going to be playing a lot of DH. He's going to be playing some second base a little bit here and there, I'm sure. So just because I have Arraez on the bench doesn't mean that, we know Rocco Baldelli. He likes to rotate guys around. But I think this makes a little bit more sense to look at as to why I have Jose Godoy on the roster, the third catcher who the Twins picked up. He spent some time with Seattle last year. Part of it is I think you like to have your third, if you're potentially going to DH a catcher, which I do think the Twins will be putting Gary Sanchez at DH some. It's nice to have that third catcher on the bench. Also, when Gary is catching, again, I think this is somewhat overblown sometimes, but he is not a good defensive catcher. There's no getting away around that. I'm not going to try to paint that in anything it's not. So, it's nice to have three catchers when you have a guy who maybe late in a game you want to take out for defensive reasons. And then it's not like, well, we've taken our one catcher out. Our only catcher left on the roster is behind the plate. So if anything happens, our emergency catcher has to go back there, which I think is Nick Gordon, if I remember correctly from last year. I could be wrong, but I think that's who it was. So you don't want that. That's sort of the manager's worst nightmare. We all remember Ron Gardenhire used to love having three catchers on the roster all the time, kind of for that same concern. So this is how I threw it in for the batters. I only have, you can see your 13 batters. We're going to look at 10 pitchers is kind of how I have this set up right now. And I could see that being the case. Now, what's with the color coding? So these would be the guys who are in camp who I don't have projected on the roster right now. And they are color coded in red because they are not on the 40-man roster. So you could maybe make an argument that Jake Cave would make more sense than Brent Rooker, because he can play center field. Kyle Garlick can also man center field. He's not very good there, but he can do it. They would have to be added to the 40-man roster. Brent Rooker's already on the 40-man roster. So it's sort of, again, just throwing that path of least resistance on here. Daniel Robertson, kind of the same thing. And he doesn't even really play shortstop. So it'd be really tough to make an argument for him to kind of be above Nick Gordon is probably who I would say. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. If Cave's not in there, who's your backup center fielder? I would say it would be Kepler and Gordon. I think this is a functional roster is kind of what I'm getting at there. Now, it could be, again, I said there's no limits. There are no limits on what you can do as far as hitters versus pitchers. It could be that they carry 12 batters and have a 16-man pitching staff. So that would then eliminate Brent Rooker and add a pitcher. So keep that in mind as we scroll down to the pitchers. If I can even fit all these guys in, I can't. I wanted to have this nice and big, though, so you could see it. So, the rotation, I have it listed with Joe Ryan because he's starting opening day, and we're sort of crossing our fingers that Sonny Gray is not going to need like an injured list stint, that he just needs a couple extra days to get ramped up, and that he will be somewhere in the rotation. I don't know if it'll be 5. Don't pay too much attention to the order. We're not sure who's following Joe Ryan yet either. Beyond that, I'm going to put Devin Smeltzer as a starter here. I think he's more than likely to contribute out of the bullpen as like a piggyback guy. Which I think he might, he or Winder might make the roster as a piggyback guy for Archer. I know he's stretched out, they say, but he's still, maybe somebody you feel good about only asking to throw 3 or 4 innings. And I mean, regardless, let alone what else is going on as far as his timetable. So again, this was the path of least resistance I have here on the pitching staff. And again, I put the 2X. So these are the extra spots. And I just filled it out as basically the guys who have the most service time and who are on the 40-man roster. So I have Duran right now off because, again, Josh Winder and Yohan Duran have not pitched in the major leagues. In fact, both of them have fewer than 20 innings, I believe, in AAA. So it really wouldn't hurt those guys to go down there. I know they both have great springs. I don't think they're still in camp just for eyewash, basically. I think they are under serious consideration. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they are on the opening day roster. But I'm just throwing this together. We'll maybe move some stuff around. But I'm just kind of throwing this together as the path of least resistance to look at. And then Danny Colombo, who we saw last year, and Jake Faria, who's got quite a bit of big league time, are still in camp. Bullpen guys, single inning guys, not on the 40-man roster. So I know Faria's kind of stretched out as well. So he's starting multiple innings. Could be that these guys make it, but again, in order for them to make the roster, they have to get added to the 40-man roster, and you got to remove somebody. A couple things I forgot to say is the biggest roster rules consideration that you have to keep into account is with guys who are out of options. And the main ones are Nick Gordon. So if you sent Nick Gordon to the minor leagues, he's out of options, so any team could claim him on waivers. That is also true of Jarrell Cotton, although he's looked good. So I think that's not really a sticking point for either of those guys. Gordon being so flexible defensively, he's a very valuable piece to have on the bench. Cotton, it looks like he's going to be a contributor in the bullpen. I was pretty decent with the Rangers last year. I was kind of surprised. That's not really a team that has a lot of pitching, so it's kind of scratching my head as to why they moved on from him this offseason. But just wanted to put that out there that those guys are, I think, virtual locks, especially since if the Twins didn't break camp with them, they would be subject to waivers. Now, John Romero, you may be like, who is this guy? This is a guy much like Godoy that the Twins have claimed off waivers in camp. He also has some big league time, and he pitched the other day. I thought he looked pretty good. He was hitting like 95, 96. He's got a nice looking changeup, and he dropped in a slider that I think he threw literally one. So I'm not going to really give a serious grade on someone who has pitched I've seen once, but it looked functional. Functional. So, however, he is still at the bottom of the pecking order. Giovanni Moran, we saw last year with the Twins very briefly. It could come down to, trying innings, but like I said, we have as it is, that's going to be the thing that really helps Winder or Duran or Smeltzer as well. Smeltzer, since he wasn't on the 40-man, it's actually been a very positive thing for him because he was able to report to camp, before the lockout, because everybody who wasn't on the 40-man roster was able to go to camp at that time when it usually opened. So Smeltzer is in terms of ramping up, he's ahead of a lot of the other guys. So if they feel like they need more length, that's really going to help those guys. Having a 10-man bullpen, I'm not sure that there's really going to be, if that's going to be like a deciding factor. Even if it's not, though, I wanted to throw that out there, but even if it's not a factor, you could definitely see where, even though I had some nice things to say about John Romero, he's kind of interesting. I also feel like he's a guy that if the Twins were to need to add a guy that they really want on opening day, like let's say Devin Smeltzer, that they, like I said, he's really stretched out. He'd be a nice insurance to have around for the first month. So if the Twins are looking to get Smeltzer back onto the 40-man, it wouldn't shock me, if John Romero, who's, they just claimed they took him off, cross their fingers and hope that he clears waivers and stays in the organization so you can keep him, just send him to AAA. But, if another team claims him, so be it. I don't mind that strategy either, because if you think about it, a lot of teams are going through the same kind of roster trimming. And so there's a lot of talent on the waiver wire. So if you ever want to try to kind of get a guy through, this is really the best time to do it, is at the end of spring training. Again, this sort of prediction here, just to start off with, I wanted to do with the path of least resistance. And again, I don't think there's a whole lot to debate. You'll let me know. Jake Cave, the Twins love him. Rocco Baldelli seems to like him. I don't have anything against the guy personally. But he's not on the 40-man roster. I'm not going to be upset if Jake Cave makes the opening day roster, especially considering we're working with 28-man rosters here. But I don't really see, I'm not going to make the argument to put him on it, just to be honest. And with Brent Rooker being on it, there's nothing he needs to go back. He has options, so that's not a concern with him. You could send him down. But there's just nothing that he needs to do in the minors to me. And, if you want to talk about him potentially playing every day, I think he's just got to learn how to be a bench bat in the big leagues. And that's easier said than done. Getting a very small amount of playing time, potentially only pinch hitting, on big stretches where you're not getting starts. It's not easy, but I tweeted out, if we were looking for fun facts, I think it was 40 days that Carlos Correa is older than Brent Rooker by only 40 days. Maybe it was 60. Either way, it was less than 100. So that kind of gives you an idea of, Brent Rooker is it's time. It's time for him to carve out a role in the big leagues. And, he could be a guy that gets removed from the 40-man roster potentially just because, there's a lot of outfield kind of glut. And again, like he's 27 and, maybe it's sometimes teams will move on from a guy and think, he's got better options elsewhere, almost kind of as a favor to a player. And if you think about it, if Brent Rooker could end up like on the Pirates or, where he's got some history with Derek Shelton, really any of kind of the bottom teams that are going to be looking for final pieces. I still think he could be a big league, absolutely, but so I don't want to make it sound like I'm dragging him through the mud, but it's the way that the Twins are built right now. It's going to be difficult for him, but I would put him on the roster. I think that there's more of an argument to not put him on and put a pitcher on instead and just go with this 3-man bench than I think there is to put one of these guys on the 40-man and not carry Brent Rooker. But that's my 2 cents on that. And again, I kind of made the case for Winder and Smeltzer. If you haven't been paying a lot of attention to spring training, I think it's pretty clear the Twins, at least right now, are looking at Jhoan Duran as more of like a single inning reliever. That doesn't mean that's going to be the plan all summer. That doesn't mean, that's the plan for his entire career. We're seeing now again, it sort of went out of style to have guys start their career in the bullpen and then transition to the rotation. We're starting to see that again. Twins fans will remember that's what Johan Santana did. To a lesser degree, that's what Francisco Liriano did. And it seemed like kind of that almost got to be in vogue for a little while. Chris Sale did that early in his career. But you didn't see that for quite a while. And now it's kind of coming back with, again, the White Sox have been doing that with some guys. So, I'm always going to be as disappointed as anybody when a potential starting pitcher gets moved to the bullpen in the Twins organization, because as we all know, starting pitching in particular is the biggest kind of area of need, the biggest area of development that needs to get turned around. If I could have anything on the Twins, it would be, guys like Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober early in their careers, lots of team control, starting pitchers that can be potential rotation solutions for you for multiple years. So I do have some regret seeing kind of Duran being used that way. But, if you think about it logically, this is a guy who is taking up a 40-man roster spot. Those are valuable. It's difficult to sort of kind of stash a guy and never expect to have to use him throughout the year on the pitching staff on the big leagues. So it is kind of, I do think they have to sort of start to think like, how can this guy impact the big league club more than what's best for this guy's development? That's kind of the conversations change once you get on the 40-man, and Duran only threw less than 20 innings last year. So to realistically expect him to ramp up to a starting pitching load, teams just don't push guys that hard after they didn't throw that many innings. So it's kind of unrealistic to think that's going to happen this year unless he just spends literally all year in the minor leagues and probably is shut down for a time period to manage his innings. So I think it makes a lot more sense to view him as, let's not do that. Let's keep him pitching. Let's put him in a 1-inning role. Now, we're not going to take away any of his pitches. He's still going to throw his full repertoire that he would as a starter. So he's still kind of working on that stuff. Put him in the bullpen. Have him only pitch basically 1 inning, maybe 2 innings at a time. And maybe he can impact the big league club. And absolutely, if you've seen him pitch ever before spring training or really since in spring training, he's looking like his old self. So that's really encouraging. And it wouldn't shock me at all if he is one of the best relievers in the Twins bullpen out the gate potentially, because he is disgusting and he has a very unique set of pitches. I'm very excited for him. Again, with him and Winder, I absolutely think these guys are in the mix for opening day spots. Winder, he is more of a guy you can see since he threw some more innings. I think he was less than 100 last year still, but he shouldered, unlike Duran, it's not like he was that low. So he's a guy where you could see maybe it makes more sense to make sure to keep him stretched out. keep him as a starter. I think that is maybe something that's going to work against him because he's the sixth starter, I think, right now. They did send Lewis Thorpe down, but he is also off the 40-man roster, so you kind of get back into that conversation of potentially needing to re-add him if it comes up. I don't think you would want to. So if you're viewing Josh Winder as your sixth starter, which I do, I don't think you would want to carry him on the big league roster and put him out of, a routine, out of his routine. I think you want to have him starting every 5 days, throwing, probably early on 70 pitches and ramping up to around 100 because you're going to need that. Maybe he makes the opening day roster because Sonny Gray's not ready. That could be something that happens too. But I don't. Talent-wise, I think Josh Winder is one of the best, 15 pitchers or whatever ridiculousness we have here in the org. I'm really excited for him. He's a guy who's worked super hard and gotten better, and he's looked good in spring training. But I do think just for sort of rotation insurance, you do want to keep him down and stretched out and throwing on a regular basis. So I would be surprised if he does make the opening day roster, unless Gray doesn't or one of these other guys doesn't. I think Winder does as a starter. I think Devin Smeltzer is going to make it. And again, I talked about him having that advantageous situation of being able to throw much longer than anybody else because he wasn't on the 40-man roster. He could come to camp earlier and face hitters. They're going to have to remove my prediction right now would be, they add Devin Smeltzer, remove John Romero, and hope that he clears waivers. So we want to kind of update that. We'll bump him over here and just put him in green because he's on the 40. Well, actually, we'll put him in red because I'm saying we've got to remove him from the 40-man. So I would put Devin Smeltzer and have them add him to the 40-man. It's not that I'm like a huge Devin Smeltzer guy. But I do think he's a good pitcher. His stuff isn't incredible, but he's a good pitcher. He knows how to pitch, and he's got length. That's going to be really valuable. And then he doesn't have that, Josh Winder situation where he's sort of a guy you're looking at as rotation insurance as much as Josh Winder. So I think that's sort of a lot of the things that Smeltzer has going for him. Not saying that I think he's better than Winder. Just saying that I think he makes sense in that role a little bit more. Now, I still think Duran could make it too. And they could just send Moran down to the minors or Stashak even. I think Stashak's sort of the same conversation that we had with Brent Rooker. He's not really all that young. He doesn't need to go to the minor leagues and pitch at all. Cody Stashak, you might as well put him on the opening day roster. Let's just take a look at this. This is probably how I would break camp. So again, I wanted to kind of start with a path of least resistance because sometimes that's just the way it works. And Duran really could use time in AAA, whether he's being a reliever or a starter. It would benefit him to be in AAA. But I don't think it's going to hurt him that much to be in the big leagues. I think there's certainly some value for both him and the Twins for him to be in the big league bullpen. So this is probably how I would do it. And again, how we get here is we're sending Moran, who I had originally had in the bullpen, down to AAA. He has options. So you're not subjecting him to waivers, totally free and clear to do that. It's just that he does have a little bit of big league time. So that's, I think, maybe at the end of the day, they don't bring Duran, they bring Moran instead. And then we're going to remove John Romero from the 40-man to make room for Devin Smeltzer to add him back. Just as another length guy, he's another lefty. When he's healthy, he's kind of like a guy they've used in different roles before too. So maybe he kind of understands what he needs to do to prepare for that. And so sort of like Griffin Jax is kind of going to be in that same role as well, to where he's Griffin Jax not going to be a starting pitcher anymore, like a traditional starting pitcher, but he could be a multi-inning reliever. I think he could be really good in that role because he's been really good the first time through the order. Let's pull that up. Actually, it's like really impressive, actually, how good that metric is compared to how bad his overall line was last year. Want to point that out first. This is a guy we're talking about who had a 6.37 ERA last year. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm really, over the moon about Griffin Jax. I know a lot of people are wouldn't want to see him on the opening day roster. But check this out. I think if you have this guy throwing through a order even one time through, not just talking about one inning, but have him go through the order once, have him really feature his slider, I think you could have a really good and interesting bullpen length piece out of this guy. And here we go. Nope, that's not what I'm looking for. What am I looking for? Okay, it's always lower down here than I'm expecting it on Baseball Reference. I'll try to make this a little bigger. All right. So what I'm talking about in concern with Griffin Jax is his first plate appearance against him as a starting pitcher. And you can see this is a sample of 126 plate appearances. Not huge, but not tiny. Opposing hitters hit 175 with a 246 on base percentage, a 351 slugging. That's a 597 OPS, a sub 600 OPS. When he was a starting pitcher last year for the Twins, the first time he went through an order. So it was the second time and the third time where you see an OPS north of 1,000. Now, he is kind of older for a product as well, but, for how old is he? So he's 27. So you don't think of him as having like a huge upside or, a lot of developmental growth. But, guys constantly learn. He learned from that big league experience, I'm sure. So I'm not saying I don't think he could ever be a starting pitcher because of how poorly that this went last year. But it definitely, you look at that and you kind of start to go, and it makes you kind of buy into thinking of him as someone who could be a legit, not just a guy like who was going to help you out with length and kind of, in this weird situation with the expanded rosters, be a helpful guy. He could be a legit piece to the bullpen. If he can kind of do that same thing he did last year with the first time through the order. And again, I think a lot of that is due to his slider being so nasty. And if they can have him feature that pitch, he could be a beast in the bullpen. All right. So that was the main discussion I want to talk about, was the roster projection. Again, if you missed it, Joe Ryan is going to be the opening day starter. If you were kind of scratching your head over why I had such a weird rotation breakdown, we're not sure how it's going to break out after that. But I think, if Sonny Gray was ready, he would be the number one. He'd be the opening day starter. Clearly, he's not ready for opening day. I put him in at number 5, sort of fingers crossed that he just needed literally a few more days to ramp up, and that he'll still take his turn in the rotation the first time through, but just maybe he's not ready for literally opening day. But that was kind of the big news of today. All right, so we're going to do the awkward thing where I downshift from my kind of main point that we were talking about to try to catch up with some of the chat. I think that's everybody's favorite section of the stream. So sorry, I wasn't able to keep up. I know we was keeping up earlier, but really started to get into that conversation. But let me know if you disagree with a lot of that. But again, we're getting down there where there's not a whole lot of names left, so it's not like there's a whole lot of else going on like there was earlier with so many guys in camp. And again, it's a 28-man active roster through May 1st. That's why they have those extra pieces. Why would we use Jake Cave over Larnach? I mean, I hope that doesn't end up being the case, but I think the main reason would be that Jake Cave can play center field and Trevor Larnach can't. Basically, that's the only kind of reasoning I could find. They're both left-handed hitters. And also maybe they think Larnach could use some more time playing every day in AAA. Whereas like with Cave, who cares? You're not developing him anymore. I think I think this was a lineup question. I don't really want to get too much into the lineup because there's not going to be a line. Rocco Baldelli is going to have a different lineup almost every day. It's possible. I mean, Luis Arraez might get more plate appearances than Ryan Jeffers. But I think the way the catching situation is, you want Ryan Jeffers in the lineup as much as possible because he's by far your best sort of two-way catcher in terms of being a good defensive catcher and having some offensive potential. Again, kind of still getting to learn about Godoy, but he's looked good. I like him. That's why I put him on the roster. And I think he creates some opportunities for them to kind of make more sense out of Gary Sanchez. And Gary's going to catch for sure. He's going to catch, but you don't want him. You don't want him out there too much behind the plate. Yeah, and keep in mind too, we didn't even mention Urshela. Urshela being a righty and Arraez being a lefty, that means Urshela's kind of on the short end of the platoon there. However, he's a better, kind of talking about defense again, he's a better defensive third baseman than Luis Arraez is. So if you're kind of wanting a better glove out there, then you're kind of maybe going to lean Urshela. So I don't think it's going to be a platoon there completely split between who's the starting pitcher. I think some games you're going to have Urshela out there against a right-handed pitcher. But I do think Arraez is going to play a ton. He's going to basically get regular starter plate appearances. So don't overreact to that, how I have him on the bench too much. It's a nice situation for Rocco Baldelli, too, to have so much flexibility with this lineup. All right. Yeah, and I see there's been some other people pointing out that Larnach could probably really benefit from some time down on the farm. And if you think about it, if Larnach he got optioned, so he's not going to make the opening day roster. But let's just have a scenario in which he did. Well, he's not going to be starting. Maybe he would be in some kind of a timeshare situation. Maybe you could find enough at bats for him, especially since there's not really a set DH. But I don't think regardless of what you think Larnach needs to work on or how he looked last year, I think you want him playing. So I think that's another thing to consider as well. Not only does he have things to work on, I think, just having him play every day is going to be important. Yeah, and that could be the case too. Yeah, I think the DH is going to be very fluid. Some days Alex Kirilloff will probably be playing first base and Miguel Sano will DH. And maybe Arraez or Brent Rooker will be in outfield. I know they've said that they don't want to use Luis Arraez in the outfield, but I think we'll see what happens once kind of the lights come on and things like that. I think they had planned that, and then after I saw Luis come in looking so good, looking like he's trim, looking in great shape, that's a guy who kind of looks like he, got himself in physical condition to run around the outfield a little bit. So I kind of am wishing that they would reconsider that because that just opens up another path for Luis to playing time and makes him even more valuable. And defensively, again, to go there, I don't love him in left field. I think Kirilloff, even though he's not a great defensive outfielder, I think he's better than Luis Arraez. But I think Alex Kirilloff is a much better defensive first baseman than Miguel Sano. Surprisingly, because he hasn't really played there a ton. He's just a really natural over there. Great, not surprising that he has such great hand-eye coordination, Kirilloff. So I kind of like that as one of the, again, so many different ways you could put this lineup out. But I like that option of Kirilloff at first, Sano at DH, and Arraez in left. So I hope they don't completely shut the door on having him play out there. All right. Yeah, and this was kind of unfortunate for a lot of different. Thanks for bringing up Randy Ansley. Randy Dobnak, of course, his fingers acting up again. He's on the 60-day IL. With how thin the pitching staff is, and especially kind of the rotation, maybe the Archer signing would have pushed. It would have pushed Dobnak out of the rotation, but he would have either been a nice guy to have as kind of a length guy in the bullpen, or he could have been that guy waiting in wings in AAA And then it kind of maybe opened you up to, hey, maybe we want to put Winder in the bullpen opening day and see what happens, and kind of play around a bit. So, not that we were really counting on Dobnak to be like a huge piece of the Twins, but it's, the pitching staff is so thin that losing anybody from it really stings. And yeah, it's just rough to look at this. It's like the opposite of, you look at, the lineup, not saying it's like some of the God Squad best lineup in the league, but there are so many different ways you can see this going well, and so many different guys that could fit in multiple positions. And then you have guys in the minor leagues that you like too, and like Miranda and Larnach we talked about. And so to go to that from kind of the pitching staff, which, you never know. Maybe like Duran comes up and is just amazing and wouldn't surprise me. And all of a sudden the bullpens look great. Because I think these main four guys are underrated. Jorge Alcala was one of the best relief pitchers in baseball in the second half. Now it's only half of a season. He hasn't established himself. But I'm not all that concerned about the bullpen figuring out eventually, but it always takes some time, a little bit of a churn to get to the right mix. And then it just feels like Taylor Rogers is so important. Like if he gets hurt, if anybody gets hurt, you're not going to be feeling real great about your bullpen, any of these top four guys, but Rogers in particular. So just kind of crossing our fingers that this works out. But I think the bullpen could be good. The rotation, like I said, we know Gray's behind. If we just imagine that he has to go in the IL, and all of a sudden your backup plan in Winder is your opening day rotation guy. And Archer did not stayed healthy. Should pull up his info. And a sort of a fun fact I have on him that even I didn't really realize this. He's 33 years old. I kind of still think of him as being youngish. It shocks me that he's 4 years older than Dylan Bundy. Maybe they were in the same kind of prospect class at one point, like rated on the same top 100 list, I'm guessing, is kind of why I kind of think they're closer, probably in age. But Archer is 4 years older than Dylan Bundy. He's got good stuff. I get why the Twins brought him in. But last year he only threw 19 innings in the big leagues. Did not pitch in 2020, and was bad in 2019. As a fifth, anytime as you have a fifth starter, you don't need them to be, the Twins don't need Chris Archer to return to his all-star level. We'll take it. We'll take it. That would be wonderful. There's a percentage chance that maybe he can do that. I'm not going to completely rule it out. But if he can just stay healthy, because, again, we're already a little concerned about Gray. I'm trying not to freak out about it, but all of a sudden you put, we don't have Dobnak, Winder in for Gray, let's just say, and all of a sudden Archer or Bundy hasn't been the picture of health himself. Really anybody, just your previous past health history doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna stay healthy. This is just, and everybody knows this. Everybody knows the Twins need more starting pitching, but this just makes me really uneasy. And I don't know, maybe they'll do a thing where they do piggybacks and, you have a guy like Jack's throwing 3 innings and Cotton can throw multiple innings and Duran could throw a couple innings, Smeltzer again. But I think that would be interesting. I kind of hope that if this is their plan, if they're not going to add, they kind of have to do that. And it'll be interesting to see that because, back in the day, relief pitchers would throw 3 innings at a time all the time. It wasn't all that uncommon for a reliever to throw 100 innings in a season. And now that's like unbelievable. You would never imagine that. And again, hopefully I haven't given up hope that they're going to trade for another pitcher. It's not ideal, to bring in a new guy and have to kind of have all the coaching staff kind of learn about him and have the catchers kind of learn about him and mesh. But if you think about it, it happens in the season. When you trade for a guy at the trade deadline, it's not like you have spring training in August to get on the same page. So I'm not too worried about that. I think the Twins could trade for a guy coming week and have him, roll out. Of course, it's not ideal, but with this weird lockout off season and all the kind of delay and the weird transactions that have been happening and just the way it's been unusual, I think we're going to see major league starting players get traded in the next week, which is weird this close to opening day, but this is a weird year. Maybe that's just wishful thinking, though. I think we're all wishing that. But somebody's going to get traded, and why not the Twins? Why not to the Twins? Again, like we said, there's a lot of position player depth, and thankfully on that side, everybody is healthy. Knock vigorously on, but that's why there is such great position player depth. So maybe that also will make the front office feel a little bit more secure in trading away some bats as well. And maybe it makes sense to wait this long in spring training. Be like, okay, we didn't need, right at the moment, we don't need to dip into our depth. So why don't we trade some of these guys to address the rotation situation? And again, I think that potentially, if you add a starter, we would imagine Archer gets bumped to the bullpen, probably as like a 3-inning tandem guy, piggyback guy. And then potentially Winder goes to the bullpen because you're maybe less innings concerned. So it just creates not only just getting a better starting pitcher, all of a sudden you maybe have more interesting things you can do with Archer or Winder or whatever else. Beyond just the depth, beyond just the upgrade, there's sort of a shockwave of impact that can have. And I don't think Johnny Cueto is signed yet, which not to say that he would like elevate anything, or now that you have, he would really only make sense if Sonny Gray is like literally hurt, which is not the case. Again, I've been expressing concern about him, but he pitched in a minor league game. There's not been any, reports of him actually being injured. He just isn't ramping up as quickly as, we would need to have on opening day. One of the things to consider on an opening day, literally the opening day lineup, is that the Twins are facing a lefty, Robbie Ray. And so I think Urshela is going to be the third base. And I don't know that Arraez is going to DH. So we can look at Robbie Ray. I think they announced that. Yeah, he is a lefty, and he was so good last year. What did he do against same-sided pitching? So again, this is sort of a conversation on how flexible the lineup is going to be. So yeah, he just destroyed left-handed batters, as you would expect. And Luis Arraez, you're always going to get a good plate appearance out of him. He's not going to swing at bad pitches. He's going to be a tough out. But if we look at his career numbers, he has a 662 OPS against left-handed pitching for his career. That's a 247 plate appearance sample. 258's batting average, 360 OBP, very strong OBP. That's value right there. But a 301 slugging and a 662 OPS against left-handed pitching. I'm sure he'll get some work in against lefties. I personally probably wouldn't use Luis Arraez against lefties unless like you had a situation where somebody's dinged up. You just don't need to with the way this lineup is built. And again, the flexibility in moving guys around is really valuable, keeping guys fresh. So I don't know that if you don't see that's another thing. I didn't have Arraez in my lineup here. If you don't see Luis Arraez on the opening day lineup, it's no reason to overreact. This guy's going to play a ton, no matter what. He's going to eat into Urshela's time. He's going to eat into a lot of Sanchez's time. I don't think a catcher is going to DH always. He's going to DH a lot. And I hope he plays left field some. He's going to play some second, Polanco's not going to play every day. Carlos Correa is going to take some days off too, or Polanco will slide short, and Luis will play second. But I don't think when you're kind of looking for your opportunities to play Arraez against the tough lefties, not really one of them. Dobnak has a term contract, so I wouldn't, it's not for a great deal of money, but I don't remember what that is now. Let's pull it up. They signed him to that extension. It was pretty creative after he was pitching well, and then he was just hurt, and he's hurt again. So it's almost like it's hard to evaluate what we think of him now. Because, look at this. They've got him for sure for this year, next year, the year after that, and the year after that. And then, they can have him for even longer, but there's just a very modest in baseball. I love that we can just say that in MLB, we're a very modest $1 million buyout here. And, his salaries aren't completely prohibitive that the Twins might move on from him. But I'm not really to that point quite. He just needs to pitch. He needs to get out there. It's frustrating. I'm sure he's more frustrated than anybody else. So, don't want to say that he hasn't been doing what he's been needed to be doing. I wanted this one. Will Daniel Robertson play for the Twins this year? He is not on the 40-man roster, so it's kind of a situation where he would almost need. Yeah, we'll see him with the unless he has an opt-out. That's another thing that we're going to be seeing. Guys with minor league contracts, a lot of the times they'll have an opt-out in spring training to where if they don't make the roster, they can ask to be basically back in the free agent pool. Sandy Leon, who's a catcher, was signed by Cleveland, and he had that scenario happen there. So I could see him potentially being a guy actually the Twins sign. So that's another place where talent's going to be coming from in the next week or so. Some of those guys are going to be popping up. But this guy, he played pretty well for Tampa Bay, I want to say, for a while. Am I making that up? No, yeah, in 2018, that's solid. 122 OPS plus. That's better than solid. But, hasn't played a lot since then. I think he's had some injuries and then just kind of waiting for opportunities, because if you're a guy, if you can't play shortstop and if you can't play center field and you're not like clearly a starting player, it's really, really difficult to carve out a role and stay in the big leagues. And that's kind of his situation. So, if it's hard to try to find a path for him though, because Jose Miranda's there as well. So I was about to say, like, if Luis Arraez gets hurt, maybe there's a path there, but I think probably that would go to Jose Miranda, in my opinion. So I don't know. It's tough. He might have an opt-out though. If the Twins don't add him, he might be able to look for another opportunity. But he'd be a nice guy to have in St. Paul, just as emergency depth. Should it get to that point? All right. I already talked a bit about Archer. Somebody lamenting that he's young. Yeah. You gotta love that Nelson Cruz is still around. Anybody sad about their age? As long as Nelson Cruz is playing, a lot of us can feel good about. Hey, at least he's still out there. Juan Minaya, interestingly, he already got to minor league camp. Juan Minaya is not on the 40-man roster, so he was one of those guys, kind of like Danny Coulombe, who would have had to have been added to the 40-man roster had he made the team. But he already got sent to minor league camp, so he is not among the 36 guys still in big league camp. Again, that doesn't mean we might not see him play in a spring game. They take guys from that camp, but I do think that's a strong indication of who is under consideration for the opening day roster or not. So, and it's possible. I know Minaya signed back on with the Twins kind of maybe a little later. It was after the lockout. So maybe he just isn't, maybe he's in that kind of Sonny Gray situation where he isn't ramped up. Because I would think at least he would be in this conversation that we had of guys who potentially are in the mix for the opening day bullpen. Maybe not that he would be like a shoe-in because, again, he's not on the 40-man. But, it does kind of surprise me that this kind of early he's not in the mix still. So, again, that kind of leads me to think maybe he's kind of coming a little bit behind or not completely healthy. We'll see. But he's a guy it's really nice to have those guys in AAA, not occupying 40-man roster spots, and just in the system because he's a guy who can be a legit, not a back end of the bullpen solution, but if you need a guy to come in and pitch the 6th inning, Juan Minaya showed he can handle big league hitters. So a nice guy to have around for depth. Would I include Winder in a trade? I would include literally anyone in a trade, depending on the trade, obviously. But let's say Frankie Montas, just to put a name out there. Obviously, depending on the guys, the overall package would matter. I'm not going to send multiple tippy top prospects for Frankie Montas. I don't think there's a single person or a single player, single prospect or even like rookie player that I wouldn't send in a Frankie Montas trade. I can't. The guy has 2 years of team control. He was 6th in the Cy Young last year. He led the American League in WAR in the second half last year. There's not really, he's exactly the kind of player that the Twins need and lack. And again, they kind of have, kind of some more depth around. They have some more pieces. And I know he's behind. Winder's kind of the guy at the forefront because he's on the 40-man roster and he reached AAA last year. And, he's not exactly young either. He's not like getting up there or anything. 25, right? Yeah, he's 25. So it's not like you really are concerned about his developmental time. But it's not as if we would think of Jordan Balazovic as being all that farther behind Josh Winder. He's also on the 40-man roster. Again, not like someone who's, under consideration for pitching an opening day, but you're not super far behind. So yeah, you would prefer to keep all your pitchers if you're pitching deficient and you're trying to add pitching. But yeah, if it came down to it and Oakland basically said, we need some kind of a near big ready pitcher, I would include Winder in a deal, depending on the specifics. No, Jordan Balazovic, he wasn't among the guys still in camp. I don't think he really ever had a super clear path to break with the big camp. He's got stuff he's got to work on. He was working on some new pitches last year. He didn't, Winder was in Double-A, and Balazovic didn't pitch especially well. Now, a lot of times that doesn't really matter about, prospect status or, your path to the big leagues. But yeah, Winder had a 1.98 ERA with Wichita last year. Ridiculous. That's the other thing about him in, not really, I wouldn't kill him to go to AAA. It's not like Winder dominated in his, it was only 4 starts anyway. Not barely even worth analyzing, but it's not as if he was so dominant in AAA that he just can't go back there. But if we look at Wichita last year, and something that's kind of tricky is Balazovic's ERA looks pretty good at 3.62. Again, not anywhere near Winder's 1.98. However, Jordan had a 1.42 or 1.402 whip, gave up 9 hits per 9. That's not very good, but limited home runs pretty well. The 3.5 walks per 9 is not great for him. And, something I do want to point out with the whip is I don't think that was a very good defensive team that he was pitching in front of. So that definitely will not help your whip if, your fielders aren't turning batted balls into outs. I don't want to throw shade at Balazovic. I like him a lot. And he's still only 20. Well, is he 22 still now, or is that from last year? So he's 23. So again, Winder's 25. And Balazovic 3. Not that you say, oh, you're 23, we wouldn't break camp with you. I just think there's enough reason for him to go back, probably to AAA, maybe AA, and pitch a little bit more, get a little bit momentum going in particular. So I don't know that he was ever really under a lot of consideration for the opening day roster, but it might not be that long until we see Balazovic. I don't expect him to sit in the minors all year, that's for sure. So, yeah, definitely don't forget about that name. The average major league team last year, 7 starters spent at least half of the season in their rotation on average, and 9 guys spent at least a month in the rotation or more. So you can look at the Twins' 9th starter and expect them realistically to spend a month in the rotation. So, yeah, don't worry. And especially the guys who are on the 40-man roster, like with Winder, like with Balazovic, those guys are going to get their shots. Opportunities are just going to open up. Guys get hurt all the time. And, they're good enough to pitch their way into opportunities as well. I don't want to naysay that either. All right. Okay, well, let's do this one. MSP Aviation throws out his opening day against Robbie Ray lineup. Yeah, that's kind of, and I think this is sort of why I put the defensive alignment as I did. Is sort of, this is what I was imagining, something along the lines of their literal opening day lineup. So I kind of landed on that, but again, going to be a lot of flexibility. But yeah, I could see that being the lineup against Robbie Ray. Again, it could game 2 could be dramatically different. You could have a couple different guys in, batting order a little bit different. It's a nice flexible situation. Can you do a minor league roster video talking about where your favorite prospects are starting? Yeah, I'm gonna. We don't know that yet, for sure. So, probably once we kind of start to learn their assignments. I know the Saints are starting the year before the Twins are. Actually, they're sticking with their season didn't get delayed from the lockout. So yeah, we'll definitely talk a lot about that. And then, if you're newer to the channel here, you don't know how things go in season, like every night I'm going to be providing, a pretty short video of minor league highlights with some Twins highlights in there too. But we're going to be talking and showing video of the actual minor league games on basically a nightly basis on this channel. So that is a huge focus of what we're going to do here, and something I really like to do. How many options does a player get? A player usually gets 3. Some guys end up getting 4 option years. Don't want to get too deep into the weeds on that. But once you're sent down and optioned to the minor leagues, it counts as an option that's been used. Now, they were talking about potentially limiting how many times a guy can go back and forth in a season, and I think they landed on 5. In the past, you could, once your option was burned, that was the only option you used for the entire year. And your team can bounce you from the big league club to the minor league club as many times as they want, and it's still, you only use one option. That's still primarily the case. But I know they were discussing adding a cap of 5 times you could bounce back and forth, which, I mean, nobody should need that anyway. That's insane. That's insane. But it happens. It happens. And I can't remember what number they landed on and whether or not that was implemented for this year or not. I don't remember. There's so much stuff that was discussed during the lockout and that's like going to be implemented next year. And then some of it was discussed and it got tabled. That I kind of, after the lockout ended, it was like, okay, I don't want to think about this stuff for a while. I got tired of that. That got real old real fast. So hopefully that at least answered part of your question. All right. Something else I wanted to bring up. Thanks everybody for hanging out. In case you missed it, I hung out a bit with Hum Baby Baseball. Go check out his channel. He's doing team previews and reached out to me about the Twins. And so I chatted with him. Don't want to, make anybody feel bad, but, we're above the Astros, okay, in views. Okay, Astros only have 497. We got 553. But, I'm feeling like the Cardinals with 11,000 over here. Like, we could get this up. So we're going to wrap up the stream here. If you want to go check that out, this is basically like an all-encompassing team preview for the Twins. Again, that was over at Hum Baby Baseball's channel. A guy named Eric was a Giants fan. I had a lot of fun talking to him. So go check that out if you're hungry for some more baseball talk. If you already did, I appreciate it. He's a guy I've been subscribed to for a couple years now, so thought it was fun to kind of do a little collab with him. But again, thank you so much, especially to everybody who was usually expecting these on Wednesdays, coming and hanging out today. Again, want to stress that that's going to be a kind of a flexible thing during the season. Sometimes when the Twins have a Wednesday night game, we'll be doing these on Thursdays. So kind of get used to that, bouncing around, kind of a flexible situation. But, real excited. We're going to be, I'm trying to get like near daily videos out at least. The end of my months at my work are a little busier, so that's why the stream had to move. I've got a little bogged down at the end of months, tied down with other stuff. So definitely ramping it back up starting tomorrow with some more videos, and very excited for this season. There's a lot of different ways this could work out. I'm not ruling out that they're going to make a big trade before the opening day. And there's a lot of paths to this being a really good Twins team, and it should be really exciting and fun to watch it all unfold. It's a really fun team to talk about, I think. And, clearly there are deficiencies. It's easy to point those out and kind of poke holes in those. But this team has a lot of strengths, and we know this is a lot of the guys that were a 100-win team not that long ago. So super hyped to just get the season going, especially again when the lockout. Got to mention it one more time, but after all that mess, it's just going to be really nice to settle into the long major league season and just have baseball every night for months. So we'll all enjoy that together. I've enjoyed this stream. I hope you have. I always enjoy spending time on these and chatting and bouncing ideas around. So thanks for hanging out. We'll talk again soon.